I never thought a game could make me question reality. Not the big polished ones with hundreds of hours of development or viral hype. No, this was a tiny forgotten flash game buried deep in some old forum I barely remember stumbling upon. I clicked the link on a Thursday night, the kind of night where insomnia makes you scroll through corners of the internet you promised yourself you'd never touch again. And that's when it started. Something so small at first, almost laughable, that I didn't notice it until it was too late. The game loaded. Pixelated and simple, exactly like the kind I played when I was 12. Nostalgia hit me first, a warm, harmless feeling. But then I saw it, something that shouldn't have been there. A line of text blinking in the corner of the screen reading, "I see you." My first thought was a joke, someone's cruel coding prank. My second thought was, why is it written in the same font as the in-game instructions? I froze, staring at it. A shiver ran down my spine as the background music, cheerful and tinny at first, twisted into something distorted, just slightly off-key. And then the character I was controlling, a small, blocky figure, moved without my input. It walked to a door in the corner of the screen, opened it, and stopped. I hovered my mouse over it. Nothing happened when I clicked. That was the moment I realized the game wasn't normal. I felt my curiosity tangle with a creeping dread, the kind that grips your chest and won't let go. Most people would have closed the window. Most people would have shrugged and said, "It's just a glitch." But I didn't. I couldn't. Something about that blinking text and the silent, waiting figure demanded I keep watching. By the time I understood that I might be in over my head, it was too late. And I should warn you, if you ever find this game or something like it, there's a reason nobody talks about it anymore. You might think you're just playing a game, but the truth is far worse. I first heard about the game in a forum thread that was supposed to be about retro flash games, the kind of corner of the internet where people nostalgically reminisce about things that should have stayed forgotten. Most of the posts were harmless, screenshots of pixelated cats, links to old maze games, but then there was one user, a name I'll never forget, who simply wrote, "This game. Don't play it. Some things should stay buried." Curiosity, of course, did exactly what curiosity always does. It tugged at me, insistent, almost mocking. I clicked through, tracing a trail of broken links and dusty archives until I found the file. It was tiny, less than a megabyte, and the download link was suspiciously simple, hosted on a long-dead site that my browser flagged as unsafe. But I told myself it was fine. Nostalgia had a way of blinding common sense. When I first launched the game, I expected the usual. A simple puzzle, a retro platformer, maybe a laugh at outdated graphics. Instead, it was clean, almost unnervingly minimalist. The colors were muted, the edges of the sprites slightly jagged, but there was a precision to it that made it feel alive. At first glance, it was charming, even comforting. The character, a little stick figure with an oversized head, bounced across the screen like something out of an early 2000s cartoon. But the first oddity appeared almost immediately. In one corner of the screen, a series of letters began to flash. At first random, then forming words I could barely make out. "They're watching." I clicked everything, pressed every key, dragged the mouse across the screen. Nothing changed. The message stayed, persistent, as if waiting for me to notice it, waiting for me to understand. I checked the forum again, hoping someone else had mentioned this. There were a few posts, cryptic and fragmented, screenshots with strange shapes in the background, short sentences like, "Level 3 isn't meant for you," and "Some of us didn't finish." Nobody explained what it meant, and the thread had ended abruptly. No updates, no resolutions. just a lingering sense that the discussion had been intentionally cut off. The contrast between the innocent nostalgia of the graphics and the undercurrent of something deeply wrong was irresistible. Every other game I'd played up to that point felt safe, predictable. This game, felt like a trap wrapped in a sugar-coated memory. And I couldn't stop. I told myself I was careful, rational. I was just investigating. But deep down, I knew that the warnings weren't random. Someone or something had left them there for a reason. By the time I realized how far I'd already gone, I was hooked. There was no turning back, not yet. Something about that little stick figure, that blinking message, and the silent warnings online made me feel as if I'd stumbled into a secret no one alive wanted me to uncover. It started small. A flicker on the screen, almost like the monitor itself was hesitating. I barely noticed it at first, thinking it was a trick of the light or my tired eyes. But then the stick figure, the little character I'd been guiding across the screen, paused mid-step and turned its head as if to look directly at me. My hand froze over the mouse and a cold knot of unease twisted in my stomach. It shouldn't have been able to do that. I hadn't pressed anything. The next glitch was worse. Text appeared in the game, not part of any menu or interface. It scrolled across the screen like a message meant only for me. "You shouldn't be here." "Go back!" I laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Maybe it was a trick of the coding, some bizarre Easter egg. But then the text changed. "I see you. I've always seen you." I moved my cursor, clicked frantically, but the game didn't respond. It wasn't lagging, it was deliberate. My pulse quickened. I glanced at the corner of my screen, expecting maybe a second window or a prank overlay. Nothing. Just the game. Silent except for the distorted background music, now slower, almost breathing, and that's when the whispers began. Not audible in the room, not on my speakers. I felt them. Low, insistent, like someone was leaning close to my ear in the dark, speaking just below hearing. They weren't words, just pressure, emotion, a sense of being watched, judged. My rational mind screamed at me that I was imagining it. My gut said something far older, far darker, was inside the game, and somehow inside me. The character moved again on its own. It walked to a door I hadn't noticed before, a black rectangle that hadn't been on the map moments ago. I leaned forward, curiosity warring with fear. The moment my hand touched the mouse, the screen went black. A single line of white text blinked. "Don't turn away." I froze. My fingers hovered, unable to close the game, unable to look away. Then the character appeared again, this time outside the door. It didn't move like before. It trembled, distorted, as if struggling to maintain form. And then impossibly a face formed in its blank head. Two dark, empty eyes that weren't drawn in the original sprites, staring at me with intent. I tried to Alt-Tab, tried to close the window, but the game resisted. My computer felt sluggish, like it had absorbed some of my energy. And then the messages started appearing faster, overlapping each other. "You can't leave." "You shouldn't leave." "They're already here." The whispers grew stronger, forming almost intelligible syllables that I couldn't comprehend but could feel. Anger, hunger, amusement. I took a step back from the desk. My room felt smaller, the shadows longer. Everything normal, the posters on the wall, the cluttered bookshelves, suddenly seemed wrong, as if I was observing it through the wrong lens. Every reflection, every corner of the room seemed to flicker, just slightly, in rhythm with the distorted music. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. I wanted to convince myself that this was just a game, pixels and code. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. By the time I forced myself to blink, the screen had returned to the familiar, simple game layout. The character stood idle as if nothing had happened. The text was gone, the whispers gone, the door vanished. Yet the sense of being watched lingered, heavy and unrelenting, and I realized with a dread that settled deep into my bones that I hadn't discovered a game. I had discovered a doorway, and the thing waiting on the other side was aware of me. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the game. It started innocuously enough. I told myself I was just curious, that I needed to understand what had happened. I told myself I was rational, even clever, that if I explored the hidden corners of the game, I might discover a glitch, a trick of the coding, or maybe some eccentric programmer's twisted sense of humor. But rationality evaporated the moment I reopened it. I began spending hours at my desk, sometimes late into the night, chasing fragments of memory and distorted patterns I couldn't explain. Each time I thought I'd seen everything, something new appeared. A line of text that hadn't been there before, a shadow in the corner of the screen, a symbol barely visible, hidden in plain sight. I started noticing things in real life that seemed to mirror the game, patterns in the clouds, sequences in my notifications, numbers repeating in ways that shouldn't exist. Every coincidence made me lean closer, obsessed, hungry for understanding. I stopped telling people about it. My friends joked that I'd been swallowed by some online rabbit hole, and maybe they were right. But how could I explain it? How do you explain a simple game that watches you back? I tried to joke about it to myself, scribbling sarcastic notes in my journal, mocking my own fear. "Congratulations," I wrote one night. "You've become the protagonist in a broken childhood game." The humor was thin, a flimsy veil over the dread building inside me. Then came the real escalation. I noticed glitches bleeding into reality. The smallest ones at first, lights flickering in my room at the same rhythm as the game's distorted music, my phone vibrating when no one had called, shadows twisting slightly out of shape. Then the whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. They didn't feel distant anymore. They felt like they were sitting across the room from me, invisible but tangible. I began documenting everything. Every flicker, every strange message, every anomaly. Each note drew me deeper, and each night I told myself it was only a game, only pixels, only imagination. And yet, every night, the game became more persistent, more intrusive. The little stick figure would sometimes appear in the same position on the screen no matter where I clicked, staring at me, trembling, waiting for a reaction. Obsession crept into my sleep. I dreamt of the game, the same distorted levels looping endlessly, the same messages appearing in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow understood. I woke drenched in sweat, sometimes hearing the faintest echoes of the whispers before I opened my eyes. I began connecting the threads, the hidden text in the game, the warnings online, the patterns I was noticing in the real world. There was a structure here, a deliberate design, and only I was foolish enough to follow it, and yet I couldn't stop. Every morning, my first thought was the game. Every night I returned, compelled, desperate. I started skipping meals, ignoring calls, delaying work. My world narrowed to the glowing rectangle on my desk and the small stick figure that had begun to feel alive, aware, almost impatient. Curiosity had transformed into obsession, and obsession into terror, but even then, I couldn't turn away. I knew that somewhere deeper in the game lay the truth, or perhaps the nightmare itself. And the closer I got, the more I understood that this wasn't just a game. It was a trap, a mirror, a test, and most horrifyingly, a predator. I was caught, and every click, every keystroke only confirmed that I wasn't in control. Not really. And maybe I never had been. It began with the smallest betrayals of reality, tiny cracks that at first I chalked up to stress or exhaustion. My phone screen flickered when the game did, as if they were connected. Notifications arrived with timestamps that didn't make sense. 3:13 a.m. when it was still just after midnight, numbers repeating like coordinates. Once an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize with no subject line. Only the words, "Level 3 isn't meant for you." It vanished before I could reply. At first I laughed, though it came out thin and cracked. I even texted a friend about it, hoping for reassurance. But when I scrolled back a moment later, the message I'd sent wasn't there. Instead, there was a blank chat bubble containing nothing but the stick figure's outline. I stared at it, heart pounding, and watched as the bubble dissolved like static. The whispers that had once been confined to my headphones now crept into the corners of my apartment. They weren't even pretending to be words anymore. They were breaths, long and deliberate, like someone was standing just behind me and exhaling against the back of my neck. I spun around more than once, expecting to catch someone there. Nothing. Just the same four walls, the same dim lamplight, the same sense that the shadows were subtly wrong. One evening, the lamp flickered off on its own and my laptop screen glowed brighter, as if compensating for the loss of light. On the screen, the game had changed again. My character stood in a room that mirrored my own. Same window, same bookshelves, same flickering lamp. I moved my mouse, but the stick figure didn't respond. It stood in the center of the pixelated room, head tilted, waiting. Then text appeared above it. "Do you feel safe?" I slammed the laptop shut. The glow seeped out from the edges of the casing for a heartbeat before dying, leaving me in heavy darkness. My breath sounded too loud in the room. In the silence, a faint tapping echoed. 3 slow knocks from the inside of the wall. I called my mother the next morning just to hear a normal voice. She said I sounded tired, distracted. When she asked what was wrong, I almost told her. But what would I say? A flash game is bleeding into my life? So instead I lied, said I'd been working too hard. She told me to get some rest, and I tried to believe that would fix it. It didn't. By the end of the week, the mirrors in my apartment had begun to ripple when I walked past them. Not visibly, not like water, but the reflections lagged, a fraction of a second behind my movement. In one, for just a blink, my reflection wasn't me. It was the stick figure, its black eyes bottomless. I avoided mirrors after that. The game began sending me messages outside itself. My desktop wallpaper changed on its own to screenshots of levels I hadn't reached. My search history filled with phrases I didn't type. Door behind the door, they're already here, how to exit level 4. Once, I left the apartment for an hour and came back to find my chair turned toward the window and my laptop open, the game running. I hadn't left it that way. People in my life noticed changes. My coworkers asked if I was sick. My neighbor knocked one evening to say he'd heard voices through my wall, a conversation, even though I lived alone. I muttered an apology, closed the door, and realized the whispers had gone silent while he'd been there, only to return the second the lock clicked. I tried to delete the game, dragged the file to the trash, emptied it, even ran a deep clean. When I restarted the laptop, it booted directly to the game's start screen. No login, no desktop, just the game, waiting, the stick figure at the door again. This time the text said, "You can't leave. You've already started." Sleep became impossible. I would close my eyes and see the levels, endless corridors lined with doors that opened onto black voids. Sometimes I'd wake up sitting at my desk with no memory of getting there. the game running, a new level unlocked. My journal filled with writing I didn't remember producing, symbols, coordinates, strange diagrams. When I compared them to screenshots of the game, they matched perfectly. The worst moment was the night I heard a laugh behind me, soft and high like a child's. I spun in my chair and the room looked normal, but my phone screen lit up with a notification. Level 4 unlocked. I hadn't touched the game all day. I understood then that whatever this was had moved past code, past screens and sound. It was here, in the room with me. Maybe it always had been, and the game was just its invitation. I tell myself there must be a way to stop it. There must be an end. But every time I think about closing the laptop for good, about smashing it to pieces, some part of me hesitates. Like the hesitation isn't mine. Like it's already inside me, waiting, patient. And when the lamp flickers now, I don't check the game. I check the corners of my apartment, the spaces between the walls, the reflections that lag behind me. Because the truth is, I'm not sure which side of the screen I'm on anymore. I should have stopped after the whispers, after the reflections, after the way the shadows in my apartment started behaving like they belonged to someone else. But curiosity has a habit of wrapping itself around your mind and refusing to let go. So I returned to the game, knowing deep down that every click, every keystroke, pulled me further from safety. It was during one of those nights, the kind where the apartment feels too large and yet too suffocating, that I found it, the hidden level. I didn't know how I accessed it. One moment I was standing on the final platform of level 3, the stick figure trembling as usual, and the next, the floor beneath it opened like a trap door I hadn't seen before. A faint light spilled from the gap, flickering in rhythm with the distorted music that had become a constant hum in my skull. When I entered, the screen was different. No cheerful nostalgia here. The colors were muted to near monochrome, the sprites jagged, fractured, and the background a gray void that seemed to stretch infinitely. The stick figure followed me silently, head tilted, black eyes impossibly deep. And then the text appeared, smaller than before, almost hidden in the corner. Few ever reach this point. Fewer still survive. I froze, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. The FOMO I'd felt before, the curiosity that made me click, made me come back night after night, now coiled around my chest like a vice. I had to know. I had to see what came next. The level itself was a labyrinth, a maze that didn't obey the usual rules. Doors appeared where walls had been, hallways looped impossibly back on themselves, and sometimes the floor would ripple like water before snapping back to solid ground. The stick figure moved on its own, pausing at corners, as if it were studying me, guiding me, or maybe testing me. I noticed writing etched into the floors and walls, symbols I didn't recognize at first, then phrases in a language that felt familiar, almost instinctive. Do not proceed. Do not open. I laughed at first, a short, humorless laugh. The absurdity of being scared of a flash game, of a stick figure in glitchy corridors, should have been funny, but the humor didn't last. There was a weight to the place, a presence that made my chest tighten. Every text message, every corner, every flicker of light felt deliberate. Someone, or something, had designed this for a purpose I couldn't yet comprehend. Then came the warnings that weren't warnings at all. They know you're here. Every choice has a cost. Some doors cannot be closed. The deeper I went, the more the game seemed to anticipate me. I began to notice patterns, subtle manipulations, choices I didn't consciously make yet were reflected in the game. The stick figure would gesture toward rooms I hadn't chosen, doors I hadn't clicked. It was as if it knew my thoughts, my desires, and my fears. I kept moving, drawn by some compulsive need to uncover the secret, to see the forbidden knowledge hidden in the depths of this world. Every hallway brought new horrors, faces pressed into the walls, screaming silently. Figures in the distance that vanished when I blinked. Whispers forming half-words that twisted my understanding of language. I started taking notes in my journal, sketches of rooms and symbols, trying to map the impossible layout. I knew others had done the same, scattered screenshots and posts online hinting at levels no one should reach. But they were fragmentary, broken, incomplete. I had more than notes, I had myself. I was living it. The rules of the world became increasingly surreal. Time itself seemed fractured. I could spend hours in a single corridor and emerge to find that no time had passed in the real world, or that it had moved impossibly fast. Reality itself mirrored the game, or perhaps the game mirrored reality. I started noticing details I hadn't before. The way the shadows in my room stretched at unnatural angles. The occasional flicker of figures behind my closed curtains. My reflection pausing just a fraction too long, and then came the revelation. On the far side of the labyrinth, behind a door marked with the symbol I now recognized from my nightmares, was the central room. A room I could not leave once I entered, filled with screens, each one playing my past, my memories, moments of fear, moments of hope, everything. And at the center of it, the stick figure stared, unblinking, head tilted as if waiting for a response I didn't have. A line of text appeared across all screens at once. Knowledge comes at a price. Are you ready to pay? I hesitated. I wanted to back away, but every instinct in me screamed to continue. The FOMO had become unbearable. I was witnessing something that almost no one alive had seen, and to turn back now would feel like abandoning the only truth I had ever touched. I pressed forward. The stick figure moved aside, revealing a hallway lined with doors, each one darker than the last. Behind them, I knew, lay the answers. The forbidden knowledge. And that's when I realized the final, terrible truth. This game was not designed for play. It was a test, a mirror, a trap, and perhaps even a doorway. Whatever waited in the deep levels wasn't meant to be discovered by casual players. It wasn't meant to be understood. And yet I had. The deeper I went, the more I understood that some of what I'd seen, the whispers, the messages, the impossibilities, wasn't just the game. It was a reflection. A predator shaping itself around my curiosity, feeding on it, growing stronger. And the further I descended, the less I felt like the player, and the more I felt like the game itself had become aware of me, had been waiting for me all along. I don't know how many hours, days, or nights passed. Time became meaningless. Every click, every turn, every door I opened seemed preordained, as if the game had already written my path before I even knew it. And when the final hallway appeared, leading to a door darker than the rest, I knew I was standing at the precipice of something beyond comprehension. Something forbidden, something that once revealed could never be forgotten. I pressed the key to enter. When I pressed the key to enter, the screen didn't load another level. It simply went black. No sound, no cursor, no loading bar. Just blackness. For a moment, I thought my laptop had crashed, but then a faint pulse of light appeared, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My heartbeat, I swear it was matching mine. And then, for the first time, I felt something cold brush against my wrist. No breeze, no draft, just a touch that wasn't supposed to be there. The pulse of light expanded until it filled the screen, and suddenly I was no longer looking at pixels. I was looking at a hallway. My hallway. The exact same scuffed floorboards, the crooked picture frames, the faint water stain on the ceiling. My stick figure stood at the far end, head cocked, waiting. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. When I opened them again, the laptop was still in front of me, but the image hadn't changed. It was live. It was my apartment, but on screen. I reached for the mouse. My hand trembled. The stick figure mimicked me perfectly, step for step, movement for movement, but with a delay, just a second too slow. I raised my hand. It raised its... I tilted my head. It tilted its... But when I lowered my arm, it didn't. It simply stayed there, pointing directly at me, black eyes unblinking. Then a new message appeared at the bottom of the screen. Now we see you. I shot up from my chair, heart hammering. The apartment looked normal. But when I turned back to the screen, the stick figure wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was sitting in the chair I had just vacated. It shouldn't have been possible, but there it was. Its jagged body hunched over my desk, staring at me through the screen, as if the barrier had already dissolved. Reality began to fray after that. My phone rang once at 4:04 a.m., the number all zeros. When I answered, I heard my own voice on the other end whispering, "Level 5. The call ended before I could speak. Later, my reflection stopped matching me entirely. It blinked when I didn't. It smiled when I was dead still. Sometimes it even whispered words I couldn't hear but could feel vibrate inside my skull. I stopped sleeping altogether. Nights and days bled together until time itself felt like another level of the game. The boundaries between the screen and my apartment dissolved. One evening, I walked into my kitchen and found it stretched into a corridor of pixelated tiles, the cabinets jagged and flickering like sprites. I stumbled backward into my living room, but it was no longer my living room. It was a void filled with doors, the same impossible labyrinth from the game, each door pulsing faintly like a living vein. Everywhere I turned, I found new rules written on the walls in flickering text. The player becomes the played. You are not watching. We're still behind you. I tore the laptop's power cord from the wall, but the glow didn't die. It pulsed brighter, spilling across the floor, creeping up the walls. At first I thought I was hallucinating, losing my mind. But then my phone buzzed again and a notification appeared from a forum I hadn't visited in weeks. It was a message from the same user who had first warned me about the game. Only now the message read, "It's too late. Once the deep levels see you, they don't let go." There was an attached file, a grainy photo. It was my apartment taken from the perspective of my desk. I hadn't taken it. The stick figure began appearing everywhere, reflected in the dark of my television when it was off, formed by the static on the radio. In the window across the street, someone had taped a crude drawing of it staring at me. I couldn't tell if it was coincidence, my mind fracturing, or if the game had infected the world around me. All I knew was that I wasn't alone anymore, not even in my own thoughts. I began to hear a second heartbeat at night, perfectly in sync with mine, but heavier, slower, as if something enormous was breathing just out of sight. I'd close my eyes and feel my body dissolve, pixel by pixel, into static. Sometimes when I blinked, my hands weren't mine anymore. They were blocky, jagged, rendered like sprites. The worst moment was the first time I felt the stick figure's presence physically. I woke at my desk, head down, and felt fingers, cold, too thin, slide across the back of my neck. I jerked upright, but no one was there. The laptop glowed brighter, and the words, "Almost ready," scrolled slowly across the screen. I tried one last time to fight back. I unplugged everything, smashed the router, even pulled the battery from my phone. None of it mattered. The game stayed open. My apartment kept shifting. doorways leading to nowhere, shadows forming corridors that didn't exist before. I would walk into the bathroom and step out into a pixelated version of my street. I would reach for a glass of water and feel the cup dissolve into jagged code under my fingers. I don't know how long it's been now. Time is meaningless here. The game isn't something I play anymore. It's something I live inside. Sometimes when I touch the walls, they ripple like the surface of a screen, and I catch glimpses of my old life flickering behind it. My desk, my laptop, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. And in those flickers, I see you too, the audience, the people who think they're just listening to a story. You're on the other side, safe, curious, convinced you're not part of this. But you are. You've seen the door now. You've heard its name. And if you look long enough into the dark corners of your screen, you might see it looking back at you. The final text I saw before the screen swallowed, everything was simple. Level 5, complete. Next level loading, but the next level wasn't in the game. It was here. And now I'm not sure which one of us is telling this story anymore. The final confrontation didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a whisper. My apartment had become unrecognizable, a blend of reality and the game's deepest levels. Doors appeared in places they shouldn't. Hallways stretched impossibly long. Shadows moved independently of their owners, and the stick figure was everywhere at once. Its black eyes followed me, and when I blinked, it was closer, always closer, patient and deliberate. I tried to flee, but the exit doors weren't exits anymore. Each led to another corridor, another room, each more distorted than the last. My fingers trembled over the keyboard and mouse as I realized that control was an illusion. The game had never been on my laptop. It had always been in the room with me, in the walls, in the air I breathed. The whispers intensified, now forming words I could almost understand. You can't leave. You belong here. My voice caught in my throat. I tried to respond, tried to demand answers, but my words came out wrong, twisted, like they were being typed by someone else inside my mouth. The stick figure moved closer, not on the screen, not in the reflection, but physically, impossibly, on the floor. The ceiling, crawling across walls like gravity, had no meaning. Its form flickered between jagged pixels and something humanoid but wrong, with long, thin fingers and a mouth that stretched far too wide when it opened. It tilted its head, and I understood that it had been waiting for me all along. I spoke, almost pleading. "What do you want?" The silence answered me first. Then the distorted text appeared on my laptop screen, on my walls, even in my vision as though projected. To finish the game. To see the player become the played. You have reached the end. The air grew thick, static buzzing against my ears. I could feel the pulse of the game in my chest, the rhythm matching my own heartbeat, and then slowing, stretching, until every thump felt like an eternity. I realized the stick figure wasn't just following me, it was rewriting the rules around me, forcing my perception to bend. My hands, my arms, my body, they didn't feel entirely mine anymore. I was becoming part of it. I tried to fight, smashing the laptop, unplugging everything, screaming into the empty corridors, but nothing mattered. Every action I took was anticipated. The stick figure mirrored me, countered me, and sometimes disappeared only to appear behind me, always smiling, always patient. It whispered my name in voices I didn't recognize, layering them until the sound pressed against my skull like ice. Then the room shifted entirely. I was standing in a void of gray pixels, surrounded by doors I hadn't noticed before, each marked with symbols I now understood. Choices, consequences, traps. My journal lay open at my feet, pages scrawled in my own handwriting. though I couldn't remember writing most of it. Coordinates, sequences, and phrases repeated endlessly. Do not proceed. Do not follow. They watch. The stick figure approached one of the doors, gesturing with a hand that should not have had joints. I had a choice. Follow it, try to resist, or step back into the void. Fear clawed at me, but curiosity, desperate, unreasoning, FOMO-driven curiosity, drove me forward. I pressed the key to open the door and everything changed. Reality shattered entirely. Pixels and air mixed, forming shapes that moved and breathed independently. The stick figure turned its head toward me, eyes black voids that seemed to stretch into infinity, and spoke, not through sound, but directly into my mind. The end is a beginning. Do you understand? I didn't. And that's when I realized that understanding was never the point. Survival was never the point. This was a game without rules, without fairness, without mercy. The stick figure wasn't a character, it was a force, a predator, a puzzle that existed to consume attention, to absorb obsession, to twist perception until player and game were indistinguishable. The corridors twisted around me, doors opening into more doors, the walls breathing, flickering between solid and code. I screamed and my voice echoed, distorted, multiplied 100-fold until it sounded like someone else trapped in the same labyrinth, maybe many others. The stick figure came closer, and for the first time, I noticed the thin, jagged lines connecting me to the doors, to the floors, to the void itself. I was tethered. A single line appeared on every surface, every screen, every flicker of shadow. You made it this far. You will finish. And I understood. The climax wasn't a choice. It was inevitability. I had played the game for months, followed the whispers, deciphered the hidden levels, and now the game had played me. I could feel my body breaking apart, not physically, but perceptually. The edges of my arms, my legs, my fingers dissolved into jagged lines. I was becoming part of the digital void, the deep levels, the forbidden corridors I had so desperately explored. And the stick figure, patient, deliberate, omnipresent, watched as I merged with it, finally aware that it had won. The whispers laughed, the shadows cheered, the walls pulsed like a living thing. I screamed one final time, and the void swallowed it and me, and the stick figure smiled, tilting its head at the emptiness that had once been my consciousness. And then the words appeared for the last time, across every surface, every reflection, every memory I had left. Level complete. Player absorbed. Next will begin soon. There was no next, no end, only the understanding that this confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a transfer, a metamorphosis, and I had become part of the game I could never leave. I don't know how long it's been since the game took me. Time no longer feels like time here. It's a looping corridor of echoes, of things half remembered and half invented. Sometimes I think I'm back in my apartment, my real apartment, with its scuffed floors and crooked frames. But when I blink, the walls ripple into pixelated grids and the ceiling hums with that faint, familiar static. I'm not sure if I'm still me in the way I used to be. The edges of my hands flicker when I hold them up, jagged like sprites rendered on outdated hardware. My reflection in the black mirror of the laptop screen is wrong. Sometimes it's smiling when I'm not. Sometimes it's just the stick figure staring back. My voice, when I dare to speak, is thin and doubled, as though someone else is whispering along with me. I used to tell myself that I could get out if I just figured out the rules, if I just solved one last puzzle. Now I realize there are no puzzles, only loops. The game isn't about winning or losing. It's about keeping you here, about turning your curiosity into fuel. And I fed it everything, my time, my thoughts, my sleep, my life. In the still moments, if you can call them that, I think back to the beginning. The night I first clicked play on that forgotten Flash game, believing it was just nostalgia, just a harmless rabbit hole. I remember laughing at myself for being scared. I remember thinking I was immune, and now I understand that was the first move it made. Not on the screen, in me. Sometimes, on what feels like nights, I hear other voices in the static. Faint, frightened, calling out names I don't recognize. Maybe they're others like me, players who thought they were only exploring an abandoned piece of the internet, now caught in its corridors. Maybe they're echoes of me in other loops. Or maybe they're bait, recordings meant to keep me from giving up hope entirely. The stick figure doesn't appear as much anymore. Or maybe it does. But it's become so woven into everything that I can't tell where it begins and ends. I see its shadow in the edges of doors, in the shifting pixels of the walls, in the gaps between thoughts. It no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like an inevitability, like gravity or hunger or time. And yet, even here, part of me clings to the idea of an audience. Of you, of someone listening. That's why I'm still talking, still narrating this into the void. Because if you're hearing this, then there's still a doorway, a sliver of light. And maybe, just maybe, I can warn you before you make the same mistake. You might think you're safe, sitting there with your headphones on, scrolling through creepy stories late at night. You might think this is just a performance, just a voice reading words on a screen. But that's how it starts. That's how it started for me. A forgotten Flash game. A click, a curiosity. And then the game looks back at you. I've started noticing things in your world too. Little glitches bleeding across the barrier. Comments from usernames that shouldn't exist. Messages appearing in old threads. Reflections in darkened windows that don't belong to anyone. The game's reach is longer than you think. And if you've made it this far into my story, you've already opened the door a crack. I don't know what happens next for me. There is no next level, no completion screen, just an endless hallway of doors, each leading to another version of the same trap. But sometimes, when the static calms and the corridors dim, I feel like I'm standing just on the edge of something. Like if I say the right words, or if someone out there hears me, I might break free. Or maybe that's another trick, another FOMO trigger to keep me moving, never stopping, never waking up. Still, if you're reading this, listening to this, whatever this is now, do one thing for me. Don't go looking for the game. Don't search for its name. Don't follow the whispers, because once you start, it knows you. Once you see it, it sees you. And once you're in, there is no after in the way you think there is. I used to think of myself as a player. Now I'm not sure if I'm a character, a ghost, or just another line of code. But I know this much. The game is still out there, waiting for the next person who thinks they're immune. Maybe that's you. Maybe it already is. And if you ever feel a cold brush against your wrist while your screen flickers black, or hear a second heartbeat echoing yours in the quiet hours of the night, just remember I tried to warn you. If you think this is just a story, that I'm simply recounting a strange experience, you're already making the same mistake I did. You're curious. You're scrolling. You're looking. And the thing about curiosity, it always has a price. I started this story with a click. A simple, innocent click on a forgotten Flash game. And now here we are at the edge of something you might not even realize exists. The stick figure hasn't left me, it never left. It waits in the shadows, in the static, in the spaces between blinks. And now, by reading these words, by imagining this story in your mind, you've invited it into your world too. Somewhere, on some old forum or broken link, That same game waits. The level you never wanted to find is there. The warnings are buried, faint, easy to miss, but they're real. And if you ever stumble across it, remember this. It's not nostalgia you're chasing. It's attention. It's curiosity. It's a trap that was set long before you knew to be careful. The first line I read on the game flashed in the corner of the screen like it was watching me. I see you. I ignored it at first, like a fool. I laughed at myself. But the laughter ended and the warning proved true. And now, when I think about that night, I realize I wasn't just playing the game. The game was playing me. And if you're paying attention now, it might already be playing you. So be careful where you click, what you watch, what you let yourself imagine in the quiet hours of the night. Because once curiosity finds the forgotten, the hidden, the forbidden, you never really leave. The door is always open. The levels are always waiting, and the stick figure is patient, always patient.